thank you guys for both doing this. We've got Pat Casey and Ty McDevitt with the University of Minnesota, both Craw and myself's alma mater, and Ty's as well. Obviously know them really well and wanted to take this opportunity to answer some questions that we had a lot of guys in our program write in. Obviously, because we had so many questions come in, we won't be able to answer every single one. We really wanted to get to the heart of what people, families, players are looking to hear from your guys' experience on the coaching end. Thanks again for you guys doing this. And I figured the best way to go would just be to jump right in with some of the questions. So we had quite a few, which is awesome. And there's a lot of overlap. And one that I saw quite a few times, and this is, I try to whittle it down into something we talk a lot about as far as fit, finding a fit versus the best school or the best place. Because we really believe in, finding a school and a program that has all those markers about where it is. Some kids want to go south. Some kids want to stay up here. Do I need to know the coaching staff really, really well if they're a really good baseball program, school aspect, all that kind of stuff. So considering all those kind of things, is there anything specific from like an on-field perspective that you're looking for in a recruit that would be a good fit for your program? I can start with Pat too. As far as like what you see in a game, you watch the kid play a game. Is there anything that jumps out that because of this, right, he would be a good fit for our program specifically?
The first thing that I think we look at is athleticism. And whenever we're going out to watch a kid, we usually know something about him prior to going out. So we've already done some research ahead of time that shows, why we're there in the first place. So, the first thing we'll watch is, how does he warm up? How does he play catch? What does his arm action look like? How does he interact with his teammates? Is he hustling? You can tell immediately if the kid has a feel or not about how to go about his business the right way. And a lot of that is predicated on them looking and acting like a baseball player. When you show up to the ballpark, you're expecting a guy to look and act and behave a certain way, and those are big things that we pick up right away. Ty and I go out and watch guys all the time, and it starts with how they're dressed to how they take infield, outfield, to how they prepare their bullpen. And so I think a ton of that goes hand in hand with trying to find athleticism, but also at the same end, like what type of person do you have? Because as you guys both know in our program, once they're here, they're going to be here for a long, long time. We've got a policy here where we have a structure that doesn't allow for a lot of turnover from year to year. So once we take a kid, he's going to be here for quite a while. And we want to make sure that he's going to be the right fit for us, not just athletically, but also, as a character type kid, how he's going to interact with his coaches and how he's going to interact with the rest of his teammates. So that's a big piece of it. And I would say that's the first thing we're looking at is how do they come out of the dugouts and how they're dressed and how do they go about their business in pregame. Those are the first things. And then obviously the athleticism piece of it, how well they run, bat speed, arm and hand speed, all those types of things start to play in after that. But I would say those are the biggest things first off.
So Ty, they're actually then, because that's something that you hear, and that's kind of one of the old school things of like, not running out of pop-up or cussing and throwing your helmet or just, not having a really low baseball IQ or dragging, being the last guy out of the dugout. Are there actually ways that you can maybe not get completely crossed off a list, but, might, direct you to another player that's, because you have your pick of the litter essentially. So is that a real thing essentially?
Yeah, I think everything that you do on the field says something about who you are as a person and who you are as a baseball player. And sometimes it's good and sometimes it's bad and sometimes it's a plus and sometimes it's a negative. And it all certainly depends on where you're at and what other skills that you have. Obviously, you need to have some raw talent, and so that's important. But from a pitching perspective, especially the way that you look at our current game and how fast a lot of high school players are developing and all that kind of stuff, I'm not just looking for guys who have raw arm strength, but I'm looking for guys who, like Pat said, have a high level of athleticism. And then some other things that might complement my coaching style. So, for example, when it comes to developing a breaking ball, I really believe that guys have a pretty unique and innate feel for a breaking ball early on in their life. And they can start spinning that breaking ball early. And so I want to find somebody who's got a really good feel for being able to spin the breaking ball, 60% higher for strikes. They've got hard action and late action to it. They can go to it in any count. I feel very good about developing raw arm strength and velocity and being able to add on top of that. But in terms of taking a guy with only raw arm strength and then trying to build a breaking ball on top of that doesn't complement my coaching style. Now, somebody else that might be a better complement for them. So it's not saying that player's not a Division I player or isn't a quality player, but we're certainly looking for guys that complement what we're trying to do from our coaching standpoint and guys that fit the values of our program and all of that kind of stuff. So it's not just about having the raw tools. That's part of it. And it's not just about being able to put on the show that we're looking for, but there's a lot of different factors that go into it, from need that on our overall roster and a bunch of different things. So we're looking for all of them. And at the end of the day, it's never going to hurt you to have raw tools, and it's never going to hurt you to compete and be a good teammate. Those are things that you'll always have going for you.
Nice. And what, Craw, you can touch on this too, because there's like a position player aspect to it and a pitcher's aspect to it. It's good to hear you say that, Ty, because one thing that we talk about, and it's easy maybe on the mound to say, like, to know your strength and to develop that further instead of try and be 10 different things, right? And if I'm thinking something as easy as Craw and KC, a high spin rate guy and a low spin rate guy, and learning how to spin the baseball off of that and all that kind of stuff, it might not be, I've got to do all these things in the whole world to make sure that everyone, from the school right next door all the way to name a school wherever, right, they all like me. But if I have a good talent at being, a high spin rate guy with a good breaking ball, I just keep working at that and develop. And there's going to be a school out there that has a Ty McDevitt or that has somebody that might see me as a good fit.
Yeah, I think too, and just what I try to do too is just tell guys, like, kind of like what you guys are saying, is try to develop an identity of who you are and what you do well, and maybe some things that you struggle on that you'd like to get better at. But ultimately, kind of going back to the fit of the school, like when you start getting calls or you're starting having some interest there, ask questions. Ask questions. How do you see you there? What do they do well? What does a coaching staff do really well at developing? How does that fit kind of you? And then go off of that. So
I think one of the biggest fallacies, especially right now in recruiting, because we have so much access to technology and to metrics and all of that stuff, is that there's this fallacy that if I hit a certain number on the radar gun, or I get a certain, miles per hour on my exit velocity, that's going to make me a Division I recruit. At the end of the day, those things complement what you do on the field, but you have to be a dominant high school player, and that's the end of the story. So you need to show that you can dominate the high school level before we can ever think that you're going to have success at the Division I college level. And a lot of people get those steps backwards. They feel like if I throw 91, then I don't have to do anything more. I'm going to automatically get guys out. And it's the exact opposite. Those things help, but at the end of the day, you need to will yourself into dominating the high school level, and the rest of it is complementary.
That's really big too, because we hear that all the time about, well, I didn't hit well last year and I didn't get recruited by anybody, but I added 4 miles an hour to my exit velocity, so this spring it's going to happen. You know what I mean? And I think that there's obviously some upsides to having all that stuff at our fingertips, and upsides to what we do for a living, like Craw and I, to be able to increase those numbers. That's a huge win for us to have guys have PRs and stuff like that. But it is tough to kind of bring that perspective back and say that, hitting off a tee or hitting 97 exit velo off flips is not the game, right? And that's not the game that you guys look for. And that kind of leads into the next one, which I knew we were probably going to touch on right away anyways, is showcase numbers and showcases, right, versus the eye test. And I'm going to try and kill a couple birds here because I think it's pretty similar, both on raw numbers and what you see, right? So maybe a certain platform with that spits out numbers and some video versus, hey, I watched this kid play a doubleheader against really good competition, right? So I'm wondering more you guys' comments, and we can kick it back to you, Pat, about do you weigh one of those things or the other? Is it both and? Obviously, you'd still like to be able to, and this is assuming that the kid doesn't have and is off the charts good or bad in both, because that's a no-brainer, right? He's got 100 exit velo, and he was 4 for 4 with 3 doubles and hit a curveball. But as far as weighing one or the other, how do you go about that process of trying to figure out that balance?
Well, I think it's changed, since Ty and I started doing this, and the showcases, I mean, really started to come, I think, more into form kind of when you were starting to maybe come out of high school there, maybe like towards 2010, 2011, 12. So, I mean, it was a new thing for a while, and I think we were all trying to catch up with it. And I think at certain points we've all got swept away with the metrical basis of, whether it be spin rate, exit velocity, or whatever. But the one thing that we're really focused on now is performance. I mean, Ty touched on it and being a dominant player. To be perfectly honest, I mean, the big thing that we look at is the 60 time, because that really shows athleticism, and that's great. But I mean, at the end of the day, you want to try and find guys that can play the game at a high level, and that's it. I mean, that's really what it comes down to, and you two can speak on that more than anybody, because you guys were both dominant high school players. Like, you absolutely dominated the levels that you were at, and it allowed you to come to Minnesota, or in your case, Krog, go to DMAC right away and be very successful. And I mean, the same thing applies here. And whether it's, Ty will talk about it with pitching. I mean, if you're at the high school level and you're walking a lot of guys, you're giving up a ton of hits, chances are those numbers are going to multiply at our level. And the same thing applies from an offensive perspective, where if you're striking out 20, 30% of the time at the high school level, those numbers are not going to go down at the college level. I mean, it's going to take a lot of work to bring those numbers back to somewhere where it's going to allow us to use you as an adequate offensive piece. So for us, the one thing that he and I have really talked a lot about is finding guys that are performers. And we've got some guys on our team that would not perform well at a showcase right now, but they perform very well in games. And honestly, one of those guys would be Max Meyer at this point. Like, you can go back and you can look at his PBR profile, and he's not going to have exit velocity numbers that are going to jump out at you. He didn't run a very good 60. His spin rate metrics, I don't even know if we had those back then, Ty, but I mean, his numbers would not really jump off the charts at you. But what did jump off the charts was his competitiveness and the fact that he absolutely dominated the high school level, and he was an absolutely full throttle high school player. Like, he was dominant as a hitter and as a pitcher, and those are the guys that help you win games. And I know it drives Ty nuts having some guys that are not high level performers on his pitching staff as much as it drives me nuts not having guys that are high level offensive performers. But that's what we're looking to find. And all of this stuff, whether it's, how they go about their business, to how coachable are they, to checking in with you guys about him, because a big thing that he and I utilize a lot of are, what are their coaches saying about him? Are they coachable? Are they getting work done behind the scenes? Are they getting into the weight room? Are they putting in work when nobody else is working? And that's where your guys' opinion means a great deal to us, because we have obviously a very close relationship with you guys. And so what you guys are saying about prospects and what you guys are filling us in on behind the scenes and how their work ethic is, that plays a big role in it. And Ty can speak on that, because he heads a lot of our stuff in terms of nutrition, strength and conditioning, what these guys are doing in the winter months. I mean, that's a huge part of it. And you guys know as well as anybody, those are the months that make you a better player. So what we're really looking for is high-level performers. And that's what it all comes down to, is can you perform and dominate?
Yeah. That's the tough conversation to have for us right now, because just to take one note, right? Like, what your walk percentage is on the mound or what your strikeout percentage is at the plate, nobody can spit back what theirs was last year, right? And what everybody has in their mind is that one day I hit 91, right? Or whatever on the bump, right? So, and it really is, and it sounds so cliche, but baseball, it seems like, has gotten to be that sport quite a bit, where there's the steroid era, obviously, and then the metrics era now. And you still have guys that can find a way on the field and, help a team win. And really what these guys want is to be a guy, right? They want to be able to secure a spot on a college team. We try and harp that big time in our program, that, like, just if you can become a 3-hole guy and hold down a starting position at any level in college, you really should be able to hold your head high. You know what I mean? That's not easy to do. And people think that, well, if my exit velo or if I was a really big recruit and I ended up going D3, then I automatically get the 3-hole spot as a freshman because I'm better than So I think dispelling that and seeing and hearing you guys say that, because everybody thinks the D1, well, it's got to be, right? You have to throw 95. You have to hit it 1,000 feet. So it's really actually refreshing to hear that. I think this would be valuable for people, that the not sexy stuff, right? Like the learning how to, be a really tough out with 2 strikes, or learn how to throw a breaking ball in the zone and not just have a good breaking ball that goes 40 feet every time. Right? Those are things that people are looking at just as much as what's the radar gun say. So.